The information economy has arrived. The world is teeming with innovation as new business models reinvent every industry. InsideAnalysis is your source of information and insight about how to make the most of this exciting new era. Learn more at InsideAnalysis.com.
InsideAnalysis.com.
And now, here's your host, Eric Kavanaugh.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the future indeed. Yours truly, Eric Kavanaugh, here on Inside Analysis, the only coast-to-coast radio show all about the information economy. And today we're going to talk about a rather significant topic, one that affects almost everyone in business these days, because almost everybody uses the cloud. Software as a service, we call it SaaS, software as a service. Used to have different names. We used to call it application service providers, ASPs. That's what we called them back in the roaring 90s and the early aughts. Now it's all software as a service. Of course, Salesforce is the poster child of SaaS, but there are thousands and thousands of technologies these days that you can use in the cloud. They cover every last part of the business, from sales and marketing over to managing benefits to stuff like Workday. There are countless software as a service applications that you can use. And so what's happening is we're getting this very strange dynamic developing where a lot of the old practices of on-prem environments are sort of creeping into the world of software as a service. And to help us understand what all that means, we have a roundtable of great speakers today. Rob Glickman, an old buddy of mine, was with a company called Cledara. We also have Rike of RevOps Squared and Ben Murray, the Saas CFO. So we'll all talk about how you can wrest control of costs. And Rob, before I bring you in, I'll throw out one of my fun quotes I heard from a guy a few years ago who joked that the most unregulated line item on your budget, your IT budget, is your AWS bill, because you never know what it's going to be. You're going to walk into the office one day and go, holy Christmas, how much is it? Actually, spammers, phishers use that tactic. They send you an email that says, here's your Verizon bill. It's $4,321. And they want you to click and go, oh, no, don't click. No, that's just phishing. But with that, Rob Glickman of Cledara, welcome to Inside Analysis. Tell us a bit about yourself and Cledara and how you're helping companies wrest control of their software as a service costs.
All right, Eric, thanks a lot. It's good to see you. It's been a while since SAP. So I'm Rob. Nice to meet everybody. I'm a chief marketing officer at Cledara. I've been in marketing leadership for the last 20 years. So I guess a front row seat seeing this transformation from on-premise to the cloud. And I just always have found it fascinating how companies consume software and the changes that have happened over basically since the birth of Salesforce. In 99. Actually, I was just looking, Salesforce still is growing over 20% a year.
Wow.
At $30 billion in ARR.
Wow.
So the grandfather is still growing. And so, Salesforce ushered in this whole new era of software that no longer had to be, shrink wrapped and bought and downloaded and on servers that were maintained by every company. And now you can consume software based on your need. And so it just opened up this whole new era of SaaS applications for any team, for any need. And of course, it's been amazing. And it's been, one of the main reasons why we've seen so much innovation. But then, of course, the flip side is that now we have, I don't even know what the count is, 20, 30, 50,000 B2B software applications, just 10,000 alone for marketing.
Right.
And it's just out of control. So I find it very interesting. I find the topic very interesting. And fast forward, now I run marketing for a company that helps companies manage their software better and understand the right software to bring into their organization at the right time. So it's a really exciting role.
Well, and it I won't say it happened overnight because it's taken about 10 or 15 years to really take hold. But like I said, we were using ASPs in the late 1990s and into the early 2000s. And now, of course, software as a service, to your point, it's everywhere. And it's been a bit unwieldy in terms of how it has developed organically over time, right? You mentioned Salesforce, that's a big one, but all these other bit tools, niche tools, certainly for marketing. There are countless different categories in marketing, whether
Yeah.
it's influencer marketing, email marketing, social media,
Content, data, platform, advertising. It's crazy.
chat.
And you mentioned AWS. It was because of AWS and the ability for companies now not to have to, buy and manage and install servers, that they could just rent this time and space on AWS, that they could transfer that energy into thinking about their business and building their business. And then these amazing apps came along. So to start up a business now costs a fraction of what it cost even 7 years ago, precisely because of the cloud. But now companies find themselves littered with all these applications in their company, and it kind of starts to create new problems.
Yeah, that's an interesting term to use, but you're right. And especially if it's a larger company where you have people coming and going, who's managing all that? If you've got 35 or 40 different SaaS products, that's when it makes sense to use a technology like what you guys have developed at Cledara, where you at least get, if not a single pane of glass, one big pane of glass for understanding what's going where. Because I think one of the big challenges, and we'll hear, I'm sure, from our other guests too, is that these different software as a service providers will creep into other territories, right? So sales optimization becomes sales and marketing. All the email apps I've seen are adding on. Social is sort of an add-on. And what happens in the software world in good times, you start developing outside of your core area of competency. And then in difficult times, you kind of retrench and focus on the core, right? Is that what you're seeing too?
Yeah. And it's funny, everybody wants to be the center of gravity, right? So Salesforce, of course, wants you to put all their data into Salesforce and have your, core be Salesforce. And we know from experience, that's probably not the best idea. You need some kind of customer data platform. Adobe wants you to use Adobe as the center of your customer data. So every company is encroaching on that hub and wants to be the hub. So users, the people in the businesses get kind of fooled and tricked into thinking, oh, I should do this, I should do that. That's how to use software X and Y. And you end up scattering your data across all these different applications that are competing for attention.
Right.
And then, who loses is your ultimate customer you're trying to serve, because it's hard to create a consistent journey.
Sure. And then you've got, you have the old guard, SAP, Oracle, IBM. I mean, the second two of those three are really on a buying spree, right? And they're coming up with new ways to generate their revenue. But they have lost a lot of the panache, let's say, that they used to have. And now you have the new guys, Amazon, Google, Microsoft, like those are all universes in and of themselves that are trying to sort of build out. I mean, I come from the whole BI analytics space, and Microsoft very neatly catapulted to the top of that pack because their install base is so big, because they have so many people already using other stuff. And so they roll out Power BI, and guess what? Now they're kind of in the lead. But to your point, there are lots of different issues to manage here, one of which is the data sprawl, but the other is just the cost sprawl, right? So let's maybe bring in our Saas CFO on the call today. We've got Ben Murray is the Saas CFO. So you've been focused on the financial side, obviously, for a long time. Tell us a bit about your role these days and how you're helping companies wrest control of their cloud costs.
Yeah, definitely. I'm a SaaS CFO by trade, so I help a lot of SaaS founders and their finance teams really get control of, well, one thing is the spend and their metrics, their revenue forecast, et cetera, to understand the unit economics. And really, it's the 80-20 rule when looking at expenses and spend management. Where are you spending the most money or investing the most money, right? We know SaaS companies, employees are a big investment, but the internal use software tools, the SaaS spend management, that becomes a big category. You could be spending 2 or 3 points of revenue, which is a lot of margin on those internal use software tools. So sometimes the biggest challenge, as I'm sure Rob knows, is just inventorying what software we're actually using within our company. That can be like the biggest challenge just to start before you even get to the spend.
Yeah, and you wonder, because I hear this all the time, I heard it in the BI space and other spaces too, why that's not sort of built in. I mean, knowing who's using your stuff is a pretty important piece of the puzzle, whether it's login times and log out times, activity level, whatever the case may be. Just knowing who's using stuff is very useful stuff, right?
Yeah, definitely right. In our accounting system, right, we're capturing which vendors we're spending money with, but that's about it. So we can see that spend by month, which vendors, but that's where, say, the accounting process stops. Now, maybe we analyze that data, look into it, start creating a spreadsheet with all those applications that we're using. but really it has to be a team approach within these companies to figure out who's using it, what departments are using it. Are we actually using it at all?
Yeah, that's a good one. Are we using it at all? I've heard a fun trick in that environment is to shut some stuff down and see who complains. Have you ever tried that before?
I've heard that. That's like, you can prove product market fit. Yeah, if you ask your customers, if I shut down the service today, would that be a problem? Yeah.
Yeah, well, then you shut it down, and because they will say, yeah, it's a problem, but you shut it down, and if no one complains, then wait a couple of weeks. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Just a quick thing there. The funny thing is when we talk to customers who eventually prospects who become customers, the first step is to actually inventory your SaaS. And right there, it's like a light bulb goes off. It's just, it's interesting how such a simple exercise can be so shocking to a company where they can see all the software that they're actually paying for. Right. And then instantly, usually the first month, they're cutting 20 to 30% of that software right off the top.
Wow.
And then they can get to work on understanding, okay, who's using the software that we actually need, and how do we, improve the process around that. So
yeah, that's a really, really good point. And maybe just to get the whole gang in on the first segment here, let's throw it over to Ray Rike, who I know is big on tracking the value of these things and having some metrics around it. It's always good to have metrics, because that way you can say, we were up and now we're down. But Ray, why don't you tell us a bit about yourself and what you're doing to help companies figure out the cloud?
Well, thank you. And I'm going to go into the Wayback Machine and go even before ASPs, application service providers. I started my software experience in the world of time sharing, which was hosted applications sold as a subscription plus usage in the 1980s and 90s. And it's funny how we've come full circle, because SaaS is just a second generation of time sharing. It's
that's right. That's exactly
distributed servers. But what I do is we go out and look at how companies are measuring the performance and return on investment of the investment in things like sales, marketing, customer success. SaaS companies have very high valuations that typically are made on a multiple of revenue versus earnings. And the reason being was their high growth rate. So we look at things like, well, for every dollar you invest in sales and marketing, how many dollars of new annual recurring revenue are you generating? That's called the CAC ratio. Or for every customer you have in dollar of revenue, what percentage that's coming back next year? Gross dollar retention or net dollar retention. So we have surveyed about 13,500 SaaS companies, and we have the industry's largest database of performance benchmarks. That's what we do.
Yeah, so let's talk about those benchmarks. What do you typically track, and how do you typically track it? So there are some basic things like conversion rates and things along those lines. What are some of the key metrics that you've learned really matter, and then how do you track that stuff?
Well, we use a logistical regression model called R squared. And if you look at publicly traded SaaS companies, the number one metric that impacts enterprise value to revenue multiples is called the Rule of 40. The Rule of 40 looks at your year-over-year growth rate plus your EBITDA or free cash flow margin. That's the number one. Number two is your top line growth rate. And number three is something called CAC payback period. And CAC payback period looks at for how long does it take you to pay back the expense of acquiring a new customer. So that's a very important multiple. But let's go down to things like sales productivity, because Rob mentioned 10,000 MarTech products in the SaaS industry. There was about 7,500 sales technology vendors, and that's doubled over the last 3 years. So things like close rate, what percentage of opportunities are actually being closed? Close rates actually went down in the last 3 years, even though they have more technology. I'm going to give you one other metric and then I'll shut up. There's this function called sales development. Sales development is responsible for reaching out and trying to get the buyers to have a sales call with you. We just conducted some recent benchmarking research with about 600 companies. What percentage of time do you think a outbound business development rep, sales development rep spends actually doing outbound outreach?
I'm going to guess 40%, 50%.
Yeah. It was 48% of their time is doing outbound activity. And to conduct an outbound activity, they have to touch 5.4 pieces of SaaS software to do that, from getting the list, enriching that contact so you know that you're talking to the VP of sales for this size company, prioritizing who you call first, second, and third. Then you may have to try to contact with them via email and social media like LinkedIn and a phone call. So it's highly inefficient, Eric. And so for me, if you're going to invest in a new piece of technology, the first thing I would ask is, how are you going to measure the return on that investment? And then how are you going to continuously measure if you're actually getting an increased return on investment, or is it actually not providing any return?
Yeah, this brings up a lot of different issues, and I think we've done an excellent job in this opening segment of kind of segmenting all the different component parts of the strategy here. But these numbers are always difficult to kind of wrestle with, because any number of things can happen. You can have a high-performing salesperson leave the company, that brings the numbers down. You can have a new product or service offering that brings the numbers down a bit too. It's kind of hard to look across all these different segments and figure out what the heck is really happening. And I think that's just something that has to be done by management. I mean, I'll throw it over to Rob to comment on as we close up the first segment here, but you have to look at the money, you have to look at the functionality, understand who's doing what, and be able to map all that. That's a human thing, largely. That's the manager's job. What do you think, Rob?
Great point. I think this is, again, the age-old adage of, any amount of software and technology is not going to solve the problem. You have to layer in intelligent processes and good management structure and all of that. So, we always encourage our customers to just, before you buy any software, you make sure you ask yourself, what problem you're trying to solve? Is this a critical requirement now versus in 6 months? What are the alternatives? How long do you think you're going to use this? What's your measure of success and ROI? There's so many things that go along with it. I mean, I've implemented HubSpot a year ago, and I can say honestly that just now, after maybe 13 months, I feel like the integration with HubSpot and Salesforce and the way my team uses it across SDRs and marketing and management, the journey, it took me about a year. And wow. they would never really say that, because there's so many other dependencies and complexities of how that, all of the connections and all of the criteria, it's just really complex.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, that is a really, really good point. And, as someone who has been doing email marketing, I've been doing tracked email marketing for 23 years, which I think is about 3 times the duration of the average veteran in our space. So I've been doing it a long, long time. It's actually gotten harder now for lots of different reasons. But once you can see, you can't go back into the dark. I mean, you can't go back into just hoping for the future, but things change a lot. We'll pick this up in the next segment. Folks, we're talking to 3 experts all about cloud economics, wresting control of the cloud. We'll be right back. You are listening to Inside Analysis.
Welcome back to Inside Analysis. Here's your host, Eric Kavanaugh.
Take us to the future. Take us to the future, indeed. We're talking with several experts today about software as a service, how to know what you need, how to know what you should pay for what you need. I'll go back into my Wayback Machine, not too far, but 2005 timeframe. I remember the webcast platform we were using over at TWWI was only $2,000 per webcast. That's what they wanted. $2,000 per webcast. I now spend about $250 on Zoom, and I could do 200 webcasts, and who cares? I mean, they just don't even care. So that goes to show you how the scale out model works extremely well, or it certainly can, and you can get great value from this stuff, but don't sign those long-term contracts, man. Like, it's either monthly or maybe it's annual, but if it's annual, you want to pay attention to it. And I'm guessing that Rob Glickman from Cledara, you can get visibility into what stuff costs. I mean, at a certain point, that would be an interesting service offering for your company to just help people understand, you shouldn't be paying that much for email marketing unless you get this bill and that whistle and so forth, right?
Yeah, it's interesting because most companies, companies are made of people, and people are looking for software to solve a specific problem. And typically, you kind of know what your peers are using a little bit. I'm a marketer, I use HubSpot, etc. But you really don't know what you should be paying, and you don't know how that's changed over the last few years, and you don't know what companies that look like your company, the same, similar size, employees, size of revenue, et cetera, are paying or should be paying. So one of the things we have at Cledara is we have a feature called Discover, where you can, see what other companies that look like you are using. And soon we're going to be offering the ability to see what generally price ranges you should be paying. And so that visibility, if you think about now, when you want software, where do you go? You go to Google, you maybe look up some reviews, but it's hard to really find objective, benchmarked data. So the ability to see what your peers are using, and imagine getting, plugging in, your company, vertical, number of employees, generally your revenue, and getting spit out a beginner's software stack. This is the software stack that 75% of companies like you use today.
Mm-hmm.
And it depends, last year, up to last year, we used Pipedrive for our CRM, and it was great. And then we migrated, like most people, to Salesforce, because we realized, okay, now it was time to go to Salesforce. And there's that decision point that many companies go to. And then the way our company works is we provide software management. We allow companies to see what they're using, and we do that through a payments platform. So we actually issue MasterCards, and companies pay their software on those.
Oh, no kidding. How
Yeah.
interesting is that? So it's kind of a fintech /
Yes.
SaaS optimization play, which makes
Yes.
a lot of sense. I mean, fintech,
Really cool. Yeah.
you talk about innovation, man. There's a ton of innovation in fintech. And, I've used the example on a couple of shows over the years. If you go in the Wayback Machine, think about Western Union. It wasn't that long ago. You had to pay $25 or something to send $500 to your kid across the country. Right. Now you just Zelle it or Venmo or whatever. Of course, there are business models built on top of that to track communications and track dollar amounts. And, they have other service offerings they can develop on top of that, which is why they can send your money at no charge, right?
Mm-hmm.
But that's a very interesting approach. Maybe I'll throw it over to, to Ben Murray, the Saas CFO. The fintech is lighting up these days. And I guess you probably have a sort of a matrix, like Rob said, there's a starter kit. You want to have your email marketing, you want to have your social media, you want to have something else, RevOps, for example. What do you think about the basic version of things, and then rising up? How do you know when to do what?
Yeah, that's the hard thing. And I see that in the finance and accounting area all the time. Maybe you start off on QuickBooks and Xero, and now we've got to go to more of an enterprise solution. We need revenue recognition. We need to hook up to sales tax compliance. We need better reporting. So probably every department within a SaaS company goes through that same evolution, and you see it in the CFO area as well. And it's hard. Do I make that jump at 5 million revenue, 10 million? What's that inflection point where I should go to a more robust solution? But it's a natural evolution. And I say, in the Office of Finance, just like product development has their roadmap, we have our own roadmap as far as what capabilities we need to build out that can make us more efficient in the back office.
Yeah, and I'm just guessing here, focus on cash flow, for example, is important. Being able to do projections like, okay, if these deals come through, what are we looking at? If those deals don't come through, that's all crucially important stuff for especially small to mid-sized businesses, especially during times when there is recessionary pressure, even if there's not a formal recession, right?
Yeah, you need one. It's always the accounting foundation, right? So we need clean books. We need to close them fast and efficient each month. But then, you roll into the forecasting process. So we need some type of FP&A solution that gets bolted onto your accounting solution that feeds that data. So you can do the forecast, so you can do the cash flow forecast. So you talk to sales, what are you committing to this quarter, so we can roll it through our forecast. So that's a really important part of the process. And I think you mentioned earlier, once you have some of these solutions, kind of that light bulb goes off where it's like, I never want to go back to spreadsheets, to forecasting, for example, which is really common, but you progress. There are just points where it's like, it makes sense to make that next jump, and you never want to go back.
Yeah, and I'll bring in Ray. I think he's ready to jump in here. One of the really powerful components of going down the road that Ben was just talking about there is that if you've been using something like a QuickBooks or that's what we use, or some other system for a period of time, then that sort of year over year analysis becomes a lot easier. You don't have to call up Ben in accounting and say, hey, could you run a report for me on XYZ? You just do it inside the tool. And that's the whole point, right? Is that you now have a center of gravity around this domain. Let's say it's finance in terms of the money side of the equation. And you want to be able to understand, well, why are these numbers off and what happened here? You can do that much more easily once you've been using these tools for a while, right, Ben? I'm sorry, Ray, I want to throw it over to you.
In theory, the answer is yes, but let's, we do, all I do is research every day. So I'll just talk about the benchmarks. The number one used tool for financial reporting and metrics reporting in the SaaS industry, Excel. 74% of companies are still using Excel.
Wow.
So I'll give you another benchmark. And Rob, you mentioned, wouldn't it be really nice if you could look at companies by segmentation, their size, the distribution model? Well, it's exactly what we do. So the median that a SaaS company, right, who's trying to sell SaaS products to your company is investing in a salesperson to technology that she or he is using is $548 a month. So we're talking about $6,300 a year. And then if you look at what technology is being used, we can tell you that 78% are using a CRM, 50% are using a sales engagement platform. 48% are using a sales intelligence platform. I won't bore you with all the data, but the question we keep asking is, if you're spending $6,000 a year on a salesperson to use SaaS technology to help them improve their performance, why did only 38% of salespeople in the SaaS industry make quota in 2022?
Yeah.
I mean, it's shocking that we provided all this automation and, quite frankly, weapons of mass destruction in a 22-year-old's hand, and their performance is going down.
Well, you bring up a really good point, and I can almost guarantee that this answer is the correct one, at least partially correct, is complexity. It's, again, the complexity of the environment and being able to map what did what for me in which particular scenario. And of course, usage, if you're not using it all the time, right? I remember the CRM days, or I'll tell a dirty story of a war story, working for a big media company. And I went up to New York and they were just like, man, everyone must use the CRM. You must use the CRM. So this is like the year 2007. Okay. So we're talking 16 years ago. And there was, I can't remember what it was called. It was absolutely dreadful technology, dreadful. And what would happen is very few people would use it. And the people who used it would use it pretty well. And they put lots of information in there. And the thing was just slower than frozen molasses. Like you'd go in and start, okay, I did this call with someone. Let me go and enter in the CRM, clickety, and then wait. You'd wait so long, you'd go back to email or pick up the phone or do something else. You just wouldn't use it anymore. So that usability is really, really important. It has to be fast. It has to do what you want it to do. It has to be fairly cost effective. And you have to use it. And you kind of have to stick with your guns for a while, right, Ray? You shouldn't be bouncing around too much. You should make a decision and stick with it at least for a year. What do you think?
The answer is yes, and I'm going to share a best practice. There's a company called ZoomInfo. ZoomInfo provides sales intelligence software. They went public about a year and a half ago, one of the best success stories in the last 18 months. Their revenue operations group have product managers whose job is to view, watch, record, and analyze how their salespeople are using technology and the productivity of it. So they look at a sales development rep and they do unit of work measurements, et cetera, and say, they're spending 20% of their day doing this list creation. And their job is to go back and determine how they can make better use of the technology or re-engineer their process to make that unit of work more efficient. So I would say to any company out there who has a complex tech stack, watch how your AE or your SDR or your customer success manager is performing their day-to-day work, and look at, can I reduce the number of applications or can I change the process to make better use of the applications they have?
Yeah, and the answer is always going to be yes.
Yeah,
I'll
it's
throw
so
it over to Rob.
interesting. It's so interesting because even very simple things, if you don't analyze them, you can miss them. And then I think it was Ben or Ray who mentioned NRR, net revenue retention. So we look at, well, every company looks at churn, which is, the number of customers you're losing. And so you want to minimize the churn rate, the percentage of customers you're losing. And one of the key data points is, what is the handover between sales and customer success? And so we kind of went deep in this. And we realized very basic things that, there were some some AEs who were entering a lot of really good, rich info in Salesforce that, updating the fields to talk about exactly what the customer that they closed, any nuance that success should know about. And others who weren't, or some weren't doing it at all. But even the quality of doing it better than others, that had an effect on churn, because then success could pick it up with the first call being very, very specific. And what fields are considered mandatory versus optional are very important. So it really gets down to, basically it could come down to one field, whether it's mandatory or optional, that can have a big effect on your ability to retain and grow a customer. So I find that fascinating. Ray, I want to talk to you more about that, because I think that's the level of detail companies need to go at. And even at a not too complex level, like understanding how it's almost like ethnographic research, looking at consumers of the software, which are their employees, how they're actually using the software, because it's not isolated. It's how are you using Salesforce vis-a-vis Slack, vis-a-vis ZoomInfo, vis-a-vis email, and your cadences. And that's really where the complexity comes in.
Yeah, Eric, if you're okay, I'd love to double click on something Rob just said.
Yeah, go for it.
It's amazing. It's customer relationship management software, Salesforce, right? It's been used under the guise of it helps a salesperson be more productive. Quite frankly, it's just the opposite. They're less productive, but sales managers are supposed to now have more visibility into how your pipeline's performing.
Right.
But if you go out and talk to salespeople, the least favorite part of their job is entering data into their CRM.
Yep.
That's why it's such incomplete and bad data. So one of the biggest I would say, opportunities I've seen in the last 5 years is applying artificial intelligence to other communication vehicles like emails or text, because they become very predictive of whether a deal is going to close or not. So it enhances forecast management. So one of the biggest evolutions right now is revenue intelligence software. Instead of looking at the deal information the salesperson puts in, it looks at the communications between the AE, the pre-sales consultant, or if it's an existing customer for an upsell, the customer success manager is much more predictive of a deal closing than the data in the CRM.
Yeah, and you must have been reading my mind, because that's exactly where I was going to go. And I was going to give a couple examples that I've seen. Right before the pandemic, I went to the Marcom show out in Boston. There's a company called VanillaSoft. And what they do, I think, is absolutely fascinating. And this is a whole trend. I mean, you really picked up on something here, Ray. What they do is they connect to your CRM, they connect to your email, your Slack, or whatever you want. And they're kind of monitoring, they're just kind of keeping tabs on the pulse of this activity. And then the VanillaSoft will tell your person who to call next. So it's no longer a cherry picking exercise by the salesperson. And just as an example of how it works, you'll have, let's say, 50 contracts or 50 companies you're trying to get a contract with. Maybe GE is one of them. And the system will know through clickstream analysis, hey, in the last 30 minutes, we had 4 people from an address we resolved to GE on this web page looking at analytic databases. So when that guy gets off the phone, boom, the next thing comes up, call GE, call this person. So now you're not relying upon the sort of loosey-goosey understanding of a human being trying to crawl across emails and Slack channels and all this other stuff to figure out what actually indicated or what meant something somewhere. You're letting the machines do all of that. And then, of course, if you do that properly, then these machines can identify patterns. And back to Rob's point a minute ago, well, guess what? You figure out, hey, when we bring this up in the conversation first, those calls go really well. When we don't bring that up first, the calls do not go very well. That's a little thing, but it's really important. And I got to tell you, one thing I'm positive about in this modern world is that you have to change up what you're doing. Somehow, some way you have to change, whether it's the frequency, the cadence, whether it's any number of factors about what you're offering. You have to change something to get a different result, because dynamics are changing. All kind of people are changing. We'll be right back. Don't touch that dial. You're listening to Inside Analysis.
Welcome back to Inside Analysis. Here's your host, Eric Kavanaugh.
All right, folks, back here on Inside Analysis. What an all-star cast we have today, talking to Rob Glickman from Cledara, also Ray Rike and Ben Murray. Rike is the RevOps guy, I should say, and Ben is the Software as a Service CFO. And we just in the break talked about briefly Chat GPT, and what a huge thing this is. I mean, Chat GPT is just outrageous. I saw a headline today. They said 90% of content on the web will be driven by AI in like 5 years or something. Of course, it's a theory, it's a prediction. And I've played around a bit myself with Chat GPT, had it write articles on things just to kind of see what it looks like. And it's pretty darn good. They seem fairly rudimentary, but according to one of our guests here, Rob Glickman, you can train this thing over time. So Rob, tell us a bit about Chat GPT and how you folks are using it in your mission to control the cloud.
It's funny. We've been hearing about AI forever, but it seems like 2023 is going to be literally the year of AI. I mean, OpenAI about 2 months ago released this version of ChatGPT 3, and it's just remarkable. It's remarkable what you can do with it. Anything from, helping you kind of jog your, creativity to write blogs, understanding how to position something. We use it for, we use it for everything. We use it for voice to text. We use something called DALL-E for images.
Mm-hmm.
So we upload a reference image and it creates net new images, beautiful imagery that you can inform, and you can say, I want an image of a lady looking at a computer screen in a professional office. And then it provides it. And then you say, okay, now add sun and add more papers to it is remarkable. We use something called, we use speech enhance for audio. We used to, do all of these different audio takes on very high quality microphones, and creating a video was much harder. Now we use AI to just enhance the existing audio. We use GitHub Copilot for coding. So you can create code and just saying, create a string to, clean this data and then move the data from this form to that form, and then upload, this data from column C, and then create a graph. And you can just tell the AI these instructions, and it produces.
That's crazy.
Amazing. Yeah. So it's just accelerated your ability to get stuff done. Now, the unfortunate part is very quickly, Google will need to continue to update their engine, because there's going to be a lot of crappy content out there created by AI. You always still need, it's just like SaaS software, you can buy it, but you still need the human component of understanding what you're using it for, how to make it your own. So AI is a great accelerator, in my opinion, to help you get your work done or serve your customers, but you still need that, layer to personalize it and make sure it's accurate and unique.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. You're going to see a lot of companies using this stuff. I've actually noticed just in Gmail, of course, because Google is a leader here. Maybe I'll throw this over to Ben to comment on, but I've noticed, a couple of years, maybe a year and a half ago now, when it would start completing your sentences for you. Right now, I'm a typist, so it doesn't help me. It actually takes more time for me to go and select whatever I need to do to accept what they've done, or I'm like, I'll just finish typing it myself. Besides, I'm doing it a little bit differently anyway. But what's interesting is that you're going to have this sort of linguistic reflection of language, and it might start changing how we talk to each other. You think about how millennials and younger kids on their phones are just so addicted to their phones. It's kind of changing how they interact with people. There are some unforetold dynamics that are going to be unfolding here. But the bottom line is these are new, very powerful technologies, and you want to find ways to use them. And what Rob was just describing there with ChatGPT, it's like a macro, right? You can use it like you would write a macro. Well, there aren't too many people who know how to write macros in the world, but there are a lot of people who can say, hey, take this column and do that and do this and do that. And then if the machine does what you want it to do, wow, that's pretty cool. What do you think?
They have this API playground. It's just amazing. But yeah, go for it.
Yeah, I'll throw it over to Ben. What do you think about all that?
Yeah, it's you can't go to LinkedIn or Twitter without seeing someone show an example of OpenAI and ChatGPT. So, I've seen it now in, say, even Excel formulas, interpreting Excel formulas. You have this complex formula. What is it actually saying in plain English? Or, like you said, Eric, typing in a plain English request, like, hey, sum this, divide by that, and it'll translate it into an Excel formula. So you're seeing all sorts of applications. Of course, it seems endless right now. But yeah, it's the hot thing right now.
Well, and you're getting a lot of AI baked into some of these platforms. I noticed in Google Sheets, for example, it was offering to do some data cleanup for me. It said, "Oh, I noticed that you've got this column of states, and some of them are 2-letter, some of them are 3-letter. Do you want to go ahead and do all 2-letter?" It's like, wow, yes, click yes, and you're off to the races. It's still not there. I mean, it's still loosey goosey. It's like that automation stuff we talked about at the top of the hour. When you're trying to personalize with automation, ooh, you got to be real careful about like mapping out all the flows and everything and what you want to say to these people. So it's, and then when it doesn't work, it's like, "Hey, F name, what do you think about such and such?" I'm like, okay, that's an automation gone wrong. But nonetheless, you got to kind of ride the wave here. I'll throw it over to Ray to comment on, and you do research all the time. So you have to pay attention to what's happening in your space because things are changing, right, Ray?
Drastically. And in 2023, everyone's looking at how do I reduce expenses? And I'm going to give you one example of that in the sales organizations. So sales development reps that we talked about earlier in our show, um, about 50% of the emails that they're sending out to their target buyers are personalized. At median, they're spending about 12 minutes per personalized email. And they're saying they're sending out 20 of those a day. So you do the quick math and it's like, well, they're
240.
spending 3 hours or 4 hours a day writing personalized emails. And by the way, the open rates have went down and they're not that personalized. So Chat GPT, you can actually put in the email that's personalized to a male VP of marketing and ask it, please rewrite this for that particular audience,
Wow,
and it will rewrite the email for you.
that's crazy.
Or it'll actually write an email, say, based upon the VP of finance, and I'm trying to get them to download this white paper, write the email. And in a matter of 30 seconds, it actually will write that email in a very personalized voice and tone. It's incredible what it could do.
That's wild. And of course, you're getting it right now. It's free, but obviously there are costs that are going to be associated with this stuff. But the cost is so low. I mean, AI, again, if you train it properly, it has this corpus of everything that everyone said, and you can kind of train it on your organization and your culture and your technology, and really get it to kind of refine what's happening and use it as a starter kit. I think that's the key, right? You use this to get something on the canvas, and then you manually go through and touch things up. What do you think, Rob?
Exactly. I think that's, it's just like anything else, very quickly, what we're talking about now in 6 months will be common knowledge and every company will be using it.
Wow.
I'm exaggerating a little bit, but it very quickly, this is why we love technology. What's new becomes mainstream. So then it's the companies who win will be those who can use it in a smart and effective manner. And it's just as an additional, time saver. It's something to inspire a different angle for an email. And so that's really the intelligent way. It's just another layer on top of what you hopefully do very well already. People who use it just as shortcuts, I think they won't find success ultimately.
That's interesting. That's
Yeah.
a good point. In other words, using it as a shortcut is probably you're gonna short yourself, so to speak.
Yeah, everything will catch up. It was just Google in the early days, you could write a great piece of content, it could index really well. But now those days are over, right? You can't just write a great blog post and it'll index. You're competing with, so much more. So you have to constantly find different ways to become relevant. And so it's always going to get harder. I think this is going to make things much harder for middle of the road companies who don't who don't just use it as a starter, like you said. I think and then there's the conversation for education and how it's going to change high school essay writing and all this. So
yeah,
teachers and professors very quickly will just catch on and say, okay, this feels like an AI written paper, stuff like that. So yeah, it's just another example. But I think really the interesting thing that Ray mentioned was, how do we, back to our topic of using all of these different software tools. It's just becoming harder and harder as an employee to, make sense of them and do your job with the, this collection of different software that's supposed to be helping you. How can AI help in that and kind of cut across and be this layer on top of all these apps? That I think is going to be, that's a huge area that I think is going to be very attractive for businesses.
Wow, you just gave me that. I think that's exactly correct. That's very interesting. And you kind of gave me an idea here that I've thought about in the back of my mind for a while, which is like if you're AWS or Google or Microsoft, one of these hyperscalers, boy, wouldn't it be nice to be able to allow the AI to track you across your applications and start giving you some of this intelligence. I mean, that's a service offering in and of itself, where it watches what you own. It's in your space, so it's your software that you purchased, that you're using, et cetera. Very cool stuff, folks. Look these guys up online. We're talking all about wresting control of the cloud. Folks, podcast bonus segment is up next. You are listening to Inside Analysis. All right, folks, back here for the podcast bonus segment on Inside Analysis. A fantastic conversation talking to Rob Glickman, Ray Rike, and Ben Murray. And you just had a really interesting point, Ray, of how you use ChatGPT. I mean, it's a declarative engine, and apparently it understands code too, which is just really wild, right? I mean, a friend of mine had a great quote. He said, "A human can always write tighter code than a machine." Well, that used to be the case. Maybe we're now starting to turn the corner. I'll just give my favorite example of Microsoft Word. If you're using Microsoft Word, type hello world and then do save as HTML. And then open that document in a text editor. And at least as of a couple of years ago, you'd get a 4-page document with like 8,000 brackets and all this crap in there. Like, what on earth is this? That's called code bloat, right? But you can actually use ChatGPT to solve that. What are your thoughts, Ray?
I was just mentioning, we're trying to optimize those pop-up forms when someone's going to download a white paper and you want to gate them. And we won't even talk about whether gating is good or not. And we didn't think it was very attractive. So we used ChatGPT to say, please provide us updated code to make this more graphically pleasing to get a higher click-through rate. And it came back with recommended HTML changes. Incredible.
Wow.
We have our engineer, we do things in AngularJS. He had a particular code that was calling a service. And he goes, I want to see if ChatGPT could actually optimize that. So AngularJS, a form of Java, it actually optimized the code to be about 25% more efficient as measured by CPU, computer process utilization.
That's crazy, Rob. My mind is officially blown. What do you think, Rob?
It's amazing. I think it's just, it's going to just, the amazing thing about ChatGPT is that it helps marketers, it helps sales, it helps devs. And it's funny, we've been talking about how software enters organizations and how software usage is software is bloated and usage goes down and it's inefficient. But wouldn't it be interesting? It's funny how ChatGPT is kind of connecting the organization. Everybody is using it for different purposes. How maybe, this is finally the moment where AI can help tie together a lot of these the reason why we use all of this different software across functions can tie it together to whatever that business process or that goal you're trying to achieve while you're logging into different software apps. So maybe it's our savior in the end.
Well, and it might just be, constraint-based design is cool stuff. I've been a big fan of it for a long time, and I'll throw it over to Ben Murray to comment on here. At the end of the day, you have to pay your bills. You have to make sure that you're, saving enough money for yourself and for your team. And this whole AI infusion, I think, is going to be a huge benefit to organizations for the reasons that Rob just outlined. What do you think?
Yeah, I think right now you're going to have early movers who take advantage of it, but I think eventually, right, everyone's going to get to the median. It's going to be standard for everybody, and then it's that next envelope that you're pushing out. But it's really interesting right now, and everybody you can see in this conversation using it for their own application. For me, maybe it's Excel formula translation or other things, or researching topics, in the SaaS space that. Now, instead of Googling it, going to ChatGPT, and it just summarizes the answer that I need and just saves me a bunch of time.
Well, and you hit the nail on the head right there. So our publisher had sent me an email a few days ago that apparently some friend of his at Google said their boss, the CEO of Google, sent out a red alert email saying, ChatGPT, this is a problem because you said instead of Googling it, you'll do ChatGPT. And, guess what? Google has made a mountain of money. I mean, they're just printing money over there. But all this ad stuff, and it's getting harder to use Google to navigate around all the ads and for other various reasons that I've noticed.
Well, it's funny. It's the innovator's dilemma, because Google probably has something as good or better, but they probably can't release it the same way OpenAI did because of that very reason that they have revenue at stake. So it's a very interesting time right now, I think, probably inside of Google. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what, folks, look, all these gentlemen up online, Rob Glickman from Cledara. We've got Rike, and he is the RevOps expert. And of course, Ben Murray, the Saas CFO. If you need a fractional CFO to help you keep track of all this stuff, that's the guy you want. Send me an email. We're booking the year out right now. info@InsideAnalysis.com. That comes straight to yours truly. And we look forward to talking to you next time. You've been listening to Inside Analysis.